Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Cool Kids Lunch Table Podcast with PJ and Mike. Now find yourself a seat at their table.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Cool Kids Lunch Table Podcast with PJ and Mike. I'm PJ.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to talk about some TV shows, but not just TV shows, but TV finales. The best and worst finales to some of, I guess I'd say our favorite TV shows. I kind of focused on the TV shows I liked watching when I was going through my list. And I know we're probably going to hit some of the big-time TV shows that everyone talks about.
Yep.
And I think we'll probably have some less big-time TV shows.
Yeah. PJ and I are going to focus on some of our favorites. Some of these shows are just pop culture, so we just kind of know the endings as is. These are really focusing more on scripted shows. So you're not going to say like the last episode of like a reality show like The Osbournes or something like that. These are all scripted shows. So we're going to talk about maybe, I'm assuming PJ, but we'll probably touch maybe on some cartoons, streaming shows, TV shows, old, new, kind of everything.
A little bit of everything, yeah.
So PJ, I think we should start off with, I call it the probably the holy trinity of TV shows that's been probably the biggest, maybe the past 25 years, is we'll talk about this. How we start off with what's going to be The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and Game of Thrones. So how
want to hear a fun fact about me?
Okay.
I have never seen a single second of anything to do with Breaking Bad.
Okay.
Not a single episode, not a clip, nothing.
Wow. Okay, interesting.
I haven't seen Breaking Bad or whatever the spinoff was.
Right. No, I didn't see Better Call Saul yet. Yeah, but but I could touch on that. But Sopranos, though, I'll say back in the day, I'll say I watched. It's a little bit more than half. I might be even generous saying that. Now, I enjoyed the show. Because at the time I had HBO, and then anyway, I was like more of a kid. We were really kids around when it came out,
So yeah, we were kids,
like
however,
teenagers, So
that was
and that's the point.
Family viewing. We watched that show as a family in my house.
Wow.
Yeah, but some of that you probably didn't want to watch with a parent in the room, But it is, the thing about it is the way they spoke and the way they acted and the things they said were just so familiar to us coming from a big Italian family that it didn't feel out of place to watch it. That is probably in my top 5, maybe top 3 favorite TV shows of all time. I love The Sopranos. I watch that show in completion from start to end probably once a year.
Yeah. And I think it's just kind of worth noting. I think the reason why I didn't watch every episode of The Sopranos, it was a different time there, folks, where, like, if you missed an episode, it was almost, like, gone forever. Like, you would have to wait for a repeat, or maybe sometimes they used to play it, like, the hour before a new episode would air. So,
they did do that.
So that was, like, stressful. So I am still the type of person, if I miss an episode, like, I mean, now you have streaming, but still, back then, for decades, like, if you missed a show, it was like, like, it really ruined it. So,
yeah, Sopranos aired Sunday nights at 9 p.m., I think it was. And they always did the previous episode at 8 o'clock in case you missed the last week.
Yeah.
And they also would replay it like once or twice during the week. And, I mean, it had to be the highest rated TV show on at that point. I don't know anything, at least cable-wise. I mean, there might have been like basic cable shows that had higher ratings, but we're talking cable TV, which even cable TV, like your Showtimes and your HBOs, wasn't as big back then.
No.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Sopranos, I think, maybe was what made it as big as it is now to have a TV show on HBO. Otherwise, not everyone had those stations. So if you were on HBO, you weren't getting watched up until really this point.
Yeah. But
we could do a whole episode on The Sopranos.
Yeah, of course.
Today we'll just focus on the finale.
So I guess spoiler alert for all these shows, but we'll talk about the last episode with Sopranos. Obviously it was like almost somewhat of maybe even a David Lynch type ending where it just cuts to black very abruptly. But what was your initial reaction to it back in the day?
When you're watching it live, it's so jarring because you feel like, did something happen with my TV feed? What is this? You don't know at that point that that's supposed to happen. So I felt it was very jarring. And in that moment, I don't love it. But now that you know what the ending is, and it's not a surprise anymore, I actually appreciate it much, much more.
Yeah, I agree. I think, obviously it's an artistic choice, and I guess it's one of those things. I think, I can't think of the writer or the director. I mean, how could you even show? Because obviously it's implied. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, obviously that Tony Soprano got whacked at the end. But I guess it's like one of those things. Like, I'm trying to think and put myself in his shoes. How could you even make a scene like that? How could you even do that justice? So I think it's like sometimes leaving more to the imagination is better, you know?
There's also a part of me that thinks, yes, that's the ending. I think we all have accepted that the ending is he gets killed at the end. But if we don't show it, we can revisit this character if we really want to. Now, obviously, we can't because James Gandolfini died. But if he hadn't, they leave themselves an exit strategy from, all right, he didn't really die. That was just an option that could have happened, but we want to keep going. And now they can't do that. But I still think he'll never admit that. I think that was a choice to be able to come back to these characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think this is also one of the first, I'll say, like, it's sort of like it's the early internet memes where like people kept making the alternate endings of what happened, and one of them was one of my favorite. Was like it would all of a sudden, instead of cutting to black, it would cut to Earth, and it would do the explosion from Star Wars. The whole planet would explode. That's so good. Some of those are really funny.
I think it was a fitting end for that show because, like you said, what else could you do? You couldn't show this guy in the last scene take a bullet to the head. You just could. Like, what were you gonna?
It's
like,
a lot
what were you gonna do to end it?
Yeah.
Because the thing with that show is, like, he's a bad guy, right? He's a bad guy, but he's also the hero of the show, and you can't. I don't know. You root for him this whole was it 7 seasons, whatever it was, and I don't know if you could make an ending satisfying that doesn't kill him or kill him, because you don't want to see that as the last thing you see of Tony Soprano, because he's this larger than life character that you've grown to love. I don't know. He was between a rock and a hard place, I think.
Yeah. No, like I said, and another thing we'll discuss in the show we forgot to discuss in the beginning is like sometimes I'm a big PJ and I are both believers in how you end your story can really make or break a whole entire story.
A whole series. Yeah.
A series or a movie. Really, endings are huge. It could save a film. Like in my opinion, like The Dark Knight Rises, that ending kind of saved that movie. I don't think the movie's terrible, but that ending definitely.
See, I feel the opposite.
I don't.
But that ending.
Yeah. You didn't. Okay. Well, whatever. That's an whole other episode. Yeah. But I think that ending helped that movie help elevate it because definitely a flawed film.
A mess, but that's just me.
Right. That's all right.
That's another episode. If you'd like to hear my thoughts on that, listen to our Batman episode where I go into depth as to why I don't like the Nolanverse. However, for today, I think the endings can greatly impact.
Yes, like a Back to the Future. You know what I mean? All those things. Or obviously now with Sopranos, the ending does not. That show is still revisited. I think it's one of the top, stream shows. So its legacy has continued to live on.
They even made a movie out of it. It wasn't good, but they made a movie
out
of it.
The Rise of Tony Soprano, some of that.
It was basically, it was like his origin story. The Many Saints of Newark, I think.
Oh, yeah. But still, the show is still revered.
The show is, I think,
right. And
the best show
the
of all
ending,
time.
right. And the ending itself also gives the show that bit of mystery, kind of like you said, and everything. So it worked out. The next one I'll talk about is Breaking Bad. For me, I think this is the best, or no question, one of the, kind of like The Sopranos, one of the best written shows of all time.
Okay.
I mean, every episode is tight. There's not one episode that is a waste, or a filler episode. Every episode is tight. And sometimes I'm like, man, they almost could have made the series longer, not just stretch it out for the sake of it. You could have. There's so much story there. The characters are so rich. But it's a tight. It's a tight.
Anything about it.
Yeah, it's a tight.
Just to make sure I understand some of it. He's a drug dealer. He was a teacher who turns into a drug dealer. Is that the premise?
He basically gets diagnosed with with cancer, terminal cancer, like lung cancer, and then he can't afford his hospital bills, blah blah blah. His treatment. He turns to. He wants to be like. He wants to. Initially, he starts off like, I'm gonna make a very legit product. I'm just gonna sell it, not get involved. And obviously, he turns into a monster. It's kind of like he goes from like this guy who kind of just. I'll say good intentions, wants to pay, not leave his family in debt, and then he becomes a true gangster.
Everyone
and
says
terrible
how great
person.
this show is.
Yeah, it's great, man.
I've just
great.
Never had half an interest. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, I think if you give it, like, I never had it. I only watched this show maybe like a year ago, 2 years ago. Like I said, it was on basic television back in the day when it was on FX. If you missed one episode, and if you went on vacation, blah, 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 whatever, you want to watch the Yankee game, that's like, you're going to miss a huge thing. Television was so different back then. Kind of just talk about the ending. The ending, for me, was great. It wraps up everybody's storylines. You get revenge on the people you despise. Yeah, it was great. I can't really say, like I said, Breaking Bad is like phenomenal. Like the writing, man, the acting is top notch, but the writing and everything, you really couldn't write a better ending than that. Where instead of like The Sopranos where they're cutting to black, you kind of see what happens to Walter White.
Okay.
You see his demise and everything, and it was good. It was nothing. It felt like just a very satisfying conclusion. Like, I don't know what else to say. It's like, hey, and now that show is still living. It's still.
Oh yeah.
It's like The Sopranos. Those two are probably neck and neck in terms of like those shows are going to live on forever. I mean, like the quality of them, everything. They're just going to be. Those are like our Godfather 2s. They're always going to be. We talk about the pinnacle of TV shows, TV series.
Yeah.
Those two are the ones. Pristine.
Another TV show that people talk about the finale all the time is Seinfeld.
PJ, you stole my thunder because I was going to ask you, what do you think about that final episode?
So I'm a big Seinfeld fan. It's probably up there my favorite sitcoms. I was more of a Seinfeld fan than a Friends fan. I think Seinfeld's a much better show. And,
yeah.
I think it holds up better. The entire series of Seinfeld, I think, holds up better. So the finale, and I haven't seen it in a while, but from what I remember of it, is they finally get a chance to make their show about nothing, and they go to, I guess it's wherever, Los Angeles. They see a crime on the street, and they don't stop it, and they get put in jail. And
that's what I remember.
How it ends, right?
Yeah.
That's the gist. I didn't hate it. I don't know if it was the best ending, but that's another show where what else could they really do? Like, what was the ending that you'd want for Seinfeld? It had to just be another episode.
Yeah.
They wanted to give you some sort of closure. I love the whole court thing they did where they bring in Jackie Childs and they have all the past guests come back on in the court.
Yeah.
I thought that was very funny. I like that they kind of end it with the first conversation and they're like, did we talk about this already?
Yeah.
I thought that was a funny joke. I don't know what you do to end Seinfeld any way that's satisfying when it's the best sitcom ever created for TV. I don't know how else you end it. No matter what they did, it was going to feel like a letdown because people just didn't want the show to end anyway. But I thought it was a funny premise. How they ended it.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar to Breaking Bad, where like, Seinfeld kind of kept going if it wanted to.
Yeah.
He wanted it to really close on top. And I said, Breaking Bad, is similar. I think that show could have probably, because it was so rich. I don't think it would have watered it down. It was that good. But yeah, both definitely, wrapped up at their highest. But I remember watching that final episode. I didn't think it was bad. I didn't think so. I think it's forgettable. I think if that's for a show about nothing, as they say, that's the best way you could really end it. Like you said, they just, like you said, they just make a regular episode, and it just happens to be the last episode. So I guess they wanted to have some kind of,
they wanted to have some sort of closure to it.
Yeah, so it's
that kind of show.
It's admirable.
I think what happens with a lot of sitcoms, and what always sort of impacts the series finales, over time they become less about being funny and more about just continuing the 30-minute adventures of these characters that you're watching.
They get a little bit more dramatic too, I think.
They do get more dramatic. So like a show like How I Met Your Mother, for example. I was a big fan of How I Met Your Mother. It's I was a bigger fan of How I Met Your Mother than Friends. And that has a great thread line of the whole show is supposed to be Ted Mosby telling his kids how he meets their mother. And so it connects every season, and there's this great story that pulls through 10 seasons. But by the time you get to like season 5 or 6 of that show, and you're like, well, you've told all the jokes, but we still haven't met the mother, and now everything is just like dramatic and less of it being a comedy and more about just continuing Ted's story. And the last few seasons of that show, I don't want to call them a drag. I think there's great acting. I think there's great stories, but it's less about the jokes.
Yeah.
And the finale of that show, I think, is one of the worst TV finales of all time. When you say an ending can ruin a series, I don't know if you ever watched How I Met Your Mother or if you know the ending.
But
it ends on such a down note where he finally meets the mother, and in one episode you find out she dies.
Yeah. No, yeah.
I think what?
Yeah.
You built this up that I was going to get to see this guy live this life, and he's going to tell his kids how he met her and this whole thing, and it becomes she dies and I wind up with Robin anyway. What? This is what you came up with? And I don't know if it's because the show went on too long. Maybe it did, and they just kind of wrote themselves into a corner because now everyone wants to see Ted and Robin finally together because that's what you've built up for 10 seasons. I think it was 10, maybe it was 9. It was a bunch. I don't know if maybe they just put themselves into that hole where there was no satisfying conclusion because you meet the mother and you only know her for like 2 episodes or 3 episodes, whatever it is. There's no emotional connection to this character, so you kill her off and you're like, what? I don't even really care that much about this character for me to have an attachment to her, other than the fact that now Ted's sad. I think that was a terrible ending.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw it, I think, but it goes with what you're saying, just like how an ending really shapes the legacy of a show. Now it's one of those like, hey, remember I Met Your Mother? Remember that show? It's like in that category. Like,
Yeah.
hey, do you remember hey, have you seen? You never seen Sopranos? You gotta see. You never seen Breaking Bad?
Right.
Have you not seen that? You never seen Seinfeld? So it's unfortunately the ending of that show. Like I never seen it. It makes me not want to see it. You know, because now you have the power of streaming. You'd have no reason to. It sounds
you don't want to get to the end
because
you know it's going to end unsatisfying. To the opposite of that, I think Big Bang Theory has a great satisfying ending.
I only seen a few episodes.
I was hesitant to jump into that show because I'm like, is this show just going to make fun of me the whole time because I'm a comic book fan?
Right.
And this is about guys that read comic books and they're nerds or whatever. So I was hesitant to jump in. That show must have been halfway in before I really gave it a fair shot. And it turns out that Jim Parsons is funny as hell as Sheldon.
Yeah, I mean, he got his own spinoff. His character did anyway.
The Young Sheldon show, yeah. And the cast on that show is great. Johnny Galecki, who you probably know from Roseanne if you didn't know him from Big Bang Theory. Kaley Cuoco, all those people in the show are perfectly cast. They do a great job. And it shows, I found that show, as much as it did have more serious points towards the end where it was less jokey than it was in the beginning, it still had funny moments because they put the characters in organically growing situations. And it has the most character growth on TV for Sheldon, where at the end of that, at the beginning of the show, he's very self-centered, only about himself. And in the end, it becomes about Sheldon making what should have been about him, about everyone else. And it just shows how much he grew. I think that's a fantastically satisfying ending for that show, where he wins his award. He wins a Nobel Prize, which should be all about him. And the show, he's always made everything about him. And he makes that award about other people, just shows how much that character has changed over the course. It's great writing. That's a Chuck Lorre show.
Yeah.
Chuck Lorre knows how to make TV.
Yeah. I think that show is still watched and respected and quoted.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the Young Sheldon show, so it's another one where it saved the show.
They've actually done so many spin-offs of that because you had Young Sheldon, then they spun off Young Sheldon about his brother, Georgie, and now they're doing another spin-off show about the guy who owns the comic book store, and Big Bang Theory is getting his own show. They're bringing his character back. So that show has staying power. And it's because the ending is so satisfying, because if it had a shitty ending and people just immediately stopped caring, you wouldn't keep spinning the show off.
Yeah, exactly. I think now it might be a good segue, PJ, to talk about. I mean, I think I've seen maybe 1 or 2 episodes. It's Game of Thrones. Now, clearly,
I've watched it.
You know, my dad was a big fan of it. All I can say is just like looking from the outside, that show was huge. I mean, it was huge. I mean, it had a chokehold on this whole country. I know, like the Red Wedding. The guy who's like a gigantic man, the mountain guy.
Yep.
I can't think of her name. You know, she's like very tall and then she's pretty. You know, she has that famous scene where she's walking around nude and everyone's saying shame. I can't think of that actress, but she's been in. Yeah, she's a great actress.
Cersei. Oh my God, she's in everything.
And you have
Lena Headey.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. Then you have the girl who's like I can't think. She was in the new Terminator Genesis. She played like young Sarah Connor. Everyone named their kid after her, their daughter. What's the name? Oh my God, not Calpurnia. What's her name?
Everyone named their kid. I mean, I don't remember who was in
the girl.
Sansa Stark, the one that was married to a Jonas?
Yeah. The one who's like the mother of dragons. What's her name?
I know who you're talking about. The Khaleesi.
Yes. I mean, everyone after that named their daughter Khaleesi. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a whole legend behind how the show, like, also they abruptly wanted to wrap up the show because the 2 writers got, I think, an offer to, I think maybe it was Star Wars or something like that. They got like some, and they rushed it. But talk about a show where, I mean, now it's almost, I'll call it the Back to the Future line, you know, erased from existence. I mean, no one talks about it now. I mean, like, I think
the ending was so bad.
Yeah, I mean, I know they tried to do a spin-off called, I think it's called House of Dragons, actually, but
yeah, I never got into the House of
I
Dragons.
mean, but that was like dead on arrival, I think. I think it might have been actually good, but that show, though, the way that show ended, PJ, let me tell you something, like, my dad was upset about it. Everyone I said, they were like, there's even red carpet of them like doing the premiere. They knew what was coming. You know, they looked unsatisfied. So I mean that show, but that ending.
To blame the writers of the show though for this. I don't know if you know the.
Well, didn't they get offered? But didn't they get offered? I know, like the guy who wrote the books didn't finish the books. Blah blah blah.
The books were never finished, so they're obviously based on a series of books. This TV show, and Game of Thrones was just the name of one of the books. It wasn't like they were all
they're all
story. They were just one of the books, right? And the books are never finished. He still has not finished it. So the Song of Fire and Ice is really the series of books. Is written by George R.R. Martin. And the beginning of that show, and I'm not usually a fan of this time period, and I know it's like not a real place, but the fantasy sort of old-timey castles and shit, that's not really my thing. I prefer more sci-fi. So it took a lot for me to even buy into the show. It took me forever to get through it because I just wasn't super interested. But the beginning seasons are good. And the reason they're good is because they're based on books that exist, written by George R.R. Martin. They're following a script. When they got to the end, he still hasn't finished writing the book. So the writers of this show didn't really know where to go. And there's rumors that, he gave them an outline as to how it should end. No one knows if it's true. No one knows if the book, if it ever does end, is going to have a different ending. But I think, unfortunately, the writers of the TV show are probably not as creative as George R.R. Martin to wrap this up in a satisfying way. And they've been adapting something for TV, but they weren't doing anything super original here. And by the time they had to do something on their own, that's when the show takes a dive. And you realize they don't have a grasp on these characters the way the actual creator does. And the show suffers for it. And you get to the finale and it's so underwhelming. And you're just like, this is it. Winter's been coming for all these seasons and it's over like in a snap. Like the buildup was for nothing.
Yeah, well, that's why from my dad described, other friends were into the show. They always say that final season felt rushed. Where there's no, I think one of the characters dramatically all of a sudden she becomes like a psychopath. I think it's Khaleesi.
Logistical and collected and goes off the rails. And it's supposed to. And here's the problem. The reason she goes off the rails, just talk about the finale in that last season, she's related to the Mad King, and the same thing happens to him. They don't show it in the TV. That's lore that takes place before the show even starts. But they don't do a good job of explaining that in the show, and it just feels so out of place. And I blame it more on the writers because I just don't think they were able to carry the ending out without the outline being provided by George R.R. Martin. And the show suffers for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a part of it. The other part is like these are professional people. You've been writing this show, adapting it, and you got to have some kind of brain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just don't think they did. I think they had a brain for adaptation, not a brain for creativity. I hate to say that about them. I'm sure they've done, but if you look at some of the other stuff that they've even done, I don't know that it's all that great. It's David Benioff and D.B. Weiss are the guys that were running that show. Can you name another thing they've done?
No.
Exactly.
Well, regardless, the show has now bit the dust. I mean, no one revisits.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's really just now. It's like I said, it's almost like going back to How I Met Your Mother. It's like, remember that thing that was huge? It's going to be forgotten. Like I said, no one wants. It's really.
I'm going to tell you another thing they've done, and this is maybe going to shed some light as to why this is not so great. One of their other big things that they've written, X-Men Origins Wolverine, the bad Wolverine.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
These are people I think, and who am I, right? But these are people that I think are good at adapting stuff that's already done, but they have to do it creatively on their own. Not so great. That's just how I feel about why the show took a dive. They weren't, unfortunately, the people that could bring that to a satisfying conclusion without an outline. I really think that's 95% of why that season was bad.
Yeah, and like I said, it's been forgotten.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
And it's almost not even worth watching anymore. So, which is terrible because I know they had all those seasons that were revered. And great acting too. It doesn't erase those people's talents or anything, but
no.
But PJ, I want to talk about two shows that were on streaming that I really want to talk about.
Okay.
And they're only like limited series, but I think they're definitely worth watching. The first one would be Chernobyl. It was on HBO. I mean, god damn, they had so many bangers. But Chernobyl was awesome, man. I mean, that was, for those, it's about the Chernobyl disaster, and it's kind of just like the true timeline. And I think it's pretty much very accurate to what happened. And that series is intense, man. Each one leaves you off, with a cliffhanger and everything. But that final episode was like a nice wrap up because they kind of reveal how it actually happened. Like why the disaster happened, and it's almost a little technical and wordy to a certain degree, but it's dark and it's really good. And when sometimes when you have a dark show and it ends really even on a darker note, it makes that much better. But it makes that show is just like phenomenal.
I never finished
it. It's
it.
only like 5 episodes, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I started it and I was like, oh, I really like this, and then I don't know, I got distracted by something and I never went back to it. But when
Yeah.
I did start it, I was like, oh, this is a well-made show. I'll
Yeah.
probably finish it at some point.
Yeah, it kind of for those who never seen it, it kind of reminds me of like a movie like Children of Men, like just really
Hmm.
well, shot, directed, great acting. I mean, there's so many guys in that show who would you just hate. Like these
Yeah.
two scientists. I mean, completely despicable, man. Oh my god, but so good. And that, like I said, that final episode, is it thrilling? No, but it's really just kind of wrapping up. Hey, the story and what happens to those characters, and I don't want to do
Right.
too many spoilers because it's really just devastating what happens to these people. But it's so good. So definitely recommend it. Hey, and that show is still, revered. It's still rewatched.
Hmm.
There's an episode. I think it's with Theo Vaughn and Ben Affleck. He talks about
Hmm.
like, oh man, how good it is. So he said that show inspired him to direct better, and I can see the similarities when he talks about just the intensity and
Right.
that kind of somewhat shaky cam stuff. So good. Another show I love on streaming is Queen's Gambit. You don't
I
even.
never watched that either.
Yeah, you don't have to.
That's the chess show.
Yes, and it's
Okay.
like one of those things where people, like, I remember one of our good friends, Mike, he was saying, you gotta watch it. And I was like, man, I know how to play chess, but I'm like, I'm not really that. He's like, oh, you don't even need
Right.
to be, she could have been playing Uno and you would have still enjoyed it. It's really about the storyline, but like I said, I think
Hmm.
that's series 8 episodes, if I recall. You don't have to be a fan of chess. The ending is really like a sports movie. It's almost like Rocky. You know what I mean?
How many seasons is that?
It's only one season. It's only
Is that? For some reason, I felt like it was
yeah,
more than
it's
that.
a
Okay.
limited. Yeah, just like Chernobyl. Yeah,
All
those are
right.
limited TV
Okay.
series. So that final episode, like this is like it says, it's basically it is a sports. Spoiler alert: she wins. She wins the tournament. But the ending, though, I can't explain it. It was just like it was just so it was just like charming, and it has like that. Like, you could have put like Eye of the Tiger at the end as like the end credit playing. Like it just had that vibe.
Right.
It's like okay. Like
All
she
right.
just goes like into a park to play another gentleman, like an old man, like in a park, like kind of like a Central Park type of vibe.
Hmm.
And she plays it. But for me, it's a really satisfied ending. You're like, all right. You're happy for a character
Right.
transforms, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I like that ending of that show. It was good.
I'll tell you which show I think has a perfect ending, and it's not anyone's favorite show except for like three people, but Smallville. Because I can't go a whole episode without talking about a superhero. Smallville, to me, is one of my favorite shows of all time because I'm such a big Superman fan. And that ending was tough for them to do because they had this rule in place where he was never going to wear the suit, so you're never going to see him as Superman.
Yeah.
You had already been introduced to like every villain that he's ever faced. So you're like, how do you end this show? He's fought everybody before he was Superman. What do you do? What do you do? And they they do it in a way where it starts off with one of the characters on the show, Chloe. She's reading basically a comic book to her son, which is basically Superman, the story of Superman as a comic book, which kind of calls back to Superman the movie, which, if you remember, starts off with them reading the comic book. I don't know if you remember that. That's the opening scene. So it was a nice little nod to Superman the movie. And it just jumps. It's a time jump, like 7 years into the future. He's Superman. And it's just like, oh, I'm in the Daily Planet. I'm the Clark Kent that you're familiar with. I'm bumbling. I'm hiding my identity. Oh, I have to save a plane from crashing. A bomb's about to go off. It's all this kind of stuff. He just reveals the S at the end, running off the roof, does the shirt rip, and then it ends. And you're like, you know what? It just puts all the characters where you want them to be.
Yeah.
They introduce that Lex Luthor is going to win the presidency. You don't see it because the actor Michael Rosenbaum's off the show at that point, but Lex Luthor is going to be your supervillain for Superman still. Like they let you know where you're going with it. Oh, Air Force One's about to crash. Superman saves it. Oh, this is going to just kind of rapid fire little hits of Superman doing Superman things. And it's what you wanted. It felt like just Superman at the end of that without having to show it. I think they did a great job.
Yeah, and it goes back to like we said before. These shows they still have legacies, and they're still endings are huge, folks. As we see, a show that I feel like the complete opposite of this. I'll say this before I continue. I think PJ, I think you'll agree with this. Nothing's worse is when like you like something and then all of a sudden the writers or a company or whatever, it makes you feel stupid for liking it in the first place.
Yep.
I think that's like the worst. I think that's how people felt about like Game of Thrones. Like, oh, I wasted all my time. Like you feel stupid. And one of them for me was The Walking Dead. I love that show. It was on FX. and I think it was on FX. Yeah.
No,
and
it was.
Was it USA?
AMC.
Oh, AMC. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I just remember for me, and I stopped watching the show around when Negan got involved.
Yeah, I stopped watching shortly after that.
Then
when there were like 17 spin-offs, I'm like, I don't care anymore.
Yes, and then like I didn't, and then a part of me was like, let me watch the final episode. You know what I mean? I don't even know why, because I didn't watch like 4 or 5 other seasons, and I don't even remember it, folks. To be quite honest, all I remember is like a helicopter. I didn't Google it. I don't feel like looking it up. But all I remember is I felt like it was, and this is another turnoff, when they set up other spin-offs. Just from what I recall, I think you knew like Daryl and someone else. I can't even remember their names now, which is crazy because at one point I memorized all that stuff. But anyway, just so that show was dead, way before it even ended. But that last episode, like that, it just,
they're still pumping out.
Yeah, how was it even? How was that? And like goes like another thing where I said like before, like it's amazing how things have. And look, everything has a, everything has a hype, and then it dies down. I get all that,
right?
Because at one point there was like Walking Dead parties. Remember that? There was like a talk show after it ended.
Yeah, the Talking Dead.
Yeah, that was big. You had like walkthroughs at like Universal Studios. You still had all those memes with Rick yelling at Carl, like Carl. He's like drooling and all that stuff. It's forgotten, erased from existence. It's unbelievable.
I think Walking Dead has the same problem as Game of Thrones, in as much as once they veered away from what Robert Kirkman, the original writer of the comics, set in place, it went off the rails, because you have people, and I think the people involved in Walking Dead, by the way, are super creative, way more than the people that did Game of Thrones. But I think once they veered away from the outline that Robert Kirkman had provided in that comic book, that's when it starts to get bad.
Yeah,
it's just sometimes you got to stick to that source material because it worked for a reason. You start making these changes, and you're just like, change for change's sake doesn't matter. I know you don't want to do an exact copy of what was already out there, but that's when the show started getting bad. That's when they started to lose.
I mean, I think that's a part of it. I don't think that's all of it. And I think the big part of it is that the show all of a sudden went through a very dramatic like storytelling change, where like they kept doing this thing where like there'd be a whole episode of a character and then stop. And then they would show a whole other story about another character. Yeah. And it kept going like this. I can't even say it's a flashback, but it felt exhausting. Where it'd be like, I even like, because it ended like on somewhat of a cliffhanger with that character. And in the following week would be like another. Because you knew eventually all 4 characters were showing they're going to meet up.
Converge into one story.
Which I get. But it felt forever. You know what I mean? Okay, you want to do that for one season? All right, you get one. I always say, everyone gets one. You get one, but you get one chance. But anyway, I think that really hurt the show. And then, of course, I agree with Gene not following the source material. You can't be killing. If you want to do something different, you can't. Once they killed Glenn, I didn't like. I can't even think the actor's name. The guy who played the comedian. He's Negan.
I thought he was great. That guy.
Yeah, he's a very good actor. I didn't really like his acting in that.
He killed that role. I thought he was great. He felt like he walked out of the page. That's how that character was written on the page. Yeah. He was done fantastic. They killed Glenn. They also killed, I think it was Abraham in that same episode. That's not what happens. Again, I go back to like you're making all these changes as a creative choice. That's fine. But then they went back and like, but we're going to do the same storyline that's in the book with different characters. And that's when it starts to fall apart. You want to go off the rails and change something completely, then go off the rails and change something completely. But then don't do the same storyline with a different character. Because there's reasons why certain characters do things in the story that are now out of place.
Yeah,
that's the way I feel about it.
And that show also, PJ, they did a lot of things. A lot of things hurt that show too, where they would do like the fake deaths. Remember we thought everyone Glenn died, and then everyone under the dumpster,
like hiding under the dumpster.
I mean that's symbolic too. That's symbolic too, hiding under a dumpster. Yeah. I mean, oh my God, a dumpster fire, unbelievable. I think that's something that hurt the show was like you said, like these fake deaths things. That like I said, later on the series got exhausting. These episodes felt exhausting. And anyway, leading to a final episode. I mean, like after that, I mean the show, like I said, was already dead for years. And I think Rick, the guy who played Rick, he left the show at one point. Like I said, I was done watching
Andrew Lincoln.
Yes. Like I said, it's unbelievable how to me, like at one point I knew everyone's name. They carried the whole shebang. I can't even tell you nothing. It's amazing how your brain just erases something. Deleted. Obviously, that show is not. I don't know how I even know how it has spinoffs. To be quite honest, I don't know how.
It does. It just doesn't need it. And the other thing that I think hurt this show, thematically, the comic book was never about zombies, and the show deteriorated into it's a zombie show.
See, I think I think initially it started off as zombies, and then it got more about people, like the different clans. But then it became very repetitive, and just like I said, that show really
the original
suffered.
Show was like
really felt just
the show was
out.
supposed to be the book was really more about like how did people survive when society ends.
Well, yeah, I think the show did that. I think it did that.
I think towards the end it kind of just lost that.
Like I said, the Negan episodes, whether you could say the good, that has done with his acting. I'm saying, from that point, that was a turning point for the show. It was never the same. No one watched it the same. There wasn't this. It was like a religion at one point.
Yeah, anyway, I feel like they lost the plot on that. The show I really liked the ending of is House. I don't know if you watched House. That's my favorite medical show.
Right.
I'm not into watching medical drama TV shows. I don't usually find them entertaining. I thought that show was great because Hugh Laurie does such a great job as this character that
that show
but
that show is still respected and watched. It's still talked about.
The ending for that, which felt like just shouldn't work. I always felt like, man, this ending is so ridiculous and out there, it shouldn't work. But the way they wrote it made it work, where he winds up faking his own death, which feels like it shouldn't work. But it does because House is based on Sherlock Holmes. And the ending is kind of like the Sherlock Holmes ending if you've read the books and all. And I like that they tied it back into that. People don't realize his name is Dr. House. His House and Holmes is like the same thing. And his sidekick is Wilson instead of Watson. So that's, he lives on, is it Baker Street? It's very much a Sherlock Holmes show. That's the reason why he's a drug addict, because Sherlock Holmes is a drug addict. It's really it's a Sherlock Holmes show in disguise as a medical drama. And I like the ending because the ending felt very Sherlock Holmesy. And so like this ending really works in a way that it shouldn't for this type of show, because like we said, Walking Dead lost the plot. House didn't really lose the plot. It knew what it was till the end. And there were some seasons that were misses. Every show has that when it goes on for 8, 9, 10 years. All these shows that we're talking about lasted. Most of the shows we're talking about didn't last 2 seasons. They lasted a decade, right? So, if you last a show that long, it's going to have some stinkers of episodes and seasons. You just have to accept that. But that's a show that always sort of knew who that character was up until the last episode. I love that entire series.
Yeah.
From start to finish.
Hey, like I said, this is the reason why it's still spoken about. And it's a big part of it is, how it ended. Even if people don't even think about the ending anymore, there's a reason why it's still spoken about. There's think about Game of Thrones and that. There's a reason why, in the case in point.
If the ending is satisfying enough, you don't talk about the ending. You just remember the show.
Yep.
If the show winds up having a bad ending, all you do is talk about the ending was bad and now the show sucks.
Yep.
It's done.
Exactly.
You really shouldn't. The ending should be satisfying to a point where you don't think that it ever ends. You just remember how good the show was.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that all you remember is how bad the ending
is. Which actually could be a good segue, PJ, because it was maybe 2 episodes ago or so. We were talking about Spider-Man 94.
Yeah.
The animated series. And I'll be honest, when I was a kid, man, young teenager, and that, we were talking about the cartoon shows from the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
The final episode, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, he's going through different dimensions to find Mary Jane. I remember, how could you end on that? However, even before the comic book, now there's a new comic book that came out that's continuing, giving a satisfying conclusion, how we got Mary Jane back, blah, blah, blah. I in my heart, not just saying as a kid, even for all those years before this book came out, I still loved the show, and the ending, even though it ended on a very odd note, it didn't ruin the series, because in my heart, I was like, you know what, he's going to find her. I just knew that, So it didn't ruin it for me. I don't think that the final episode ruined the show. It was a weird ending, for sure, but it's like a comic book, he's going to find her. So in my head, he's going to find her. It's kind of one of those things, so.
But you're watching a show, and you're like, show this to me.
I know. I don't think it's awful. I don't think it's great.
We know he's gonna find her, but yeah.
I know. I don't think I didn't ruin the show. I think, but it was fine. I'll give it a fine. I give it a fine ending. It's not great. Yeah. It's fine. They didn't ruin the show.
Cartoon has a great ending. Speaking of superhero cartoons with a great ending, Justice League Unlimited.
Okay.
That show ends that entire universe, right? Which started with Batman the Animated Series, then it went to Superman the Animated Series, then you had the Justice League the Animated Series, then that became Justice League Unlimited. So there was, again, we're talking decades probably worth of content, right? Because Batman the Animated Series, I don't know when it started off the top of my head, but it had to be early 90s, right? And the Justice League Unlimited ended in, I think, the 2000s. 2000. It was still on. We were out of high school and it was still on. So if the show started in what, 92, 93 maybe, the first Batman, and this to end after we were out of high school means it ended in what, 2005, 2006. It's over 10 years worth of a cartoon universe that had actual theatrical releases tied to it with Batman Mask of the Phantasm. So if you look at this as one big universe of different shows that have carried it on, the ending to that show is perfect, where it even goes back to the Superman the animated series, which had not a satisfying ending, but Superman gets kind of mind controlled by Darkseid, and then it just kind of ends. This ends all of the storylines that have been going on since like Batman through Justice League Unlimited, with Superman finally getting his, I don't want to use the word revenge. Superman's not a character that gets revenge, but gets his ending. Like, he finally gets to come out on top by beating Darkseid. A very satisfying end to that whole universe. And Spider-Man couldn't let us know what happened to Mary Jane. Like, it took a decade for us to get an ending to the DC animated universe, and we're still waiting for that ending. That we had to do it as a comic book because they couldn't give us an ending for the Spider-Man show. And it's just funny how certain things work out that way. But I mean, if you want a model for how to build a universe, a shared universe, an animated universe for DC, God, that's a masterpiece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, PJ, we have to also talk about X-Men from the 90s.
Yep.
Because now they've made
they brought that back with 97.
But the last episode of that I remember being pretty cool as a kid. And I remember it was a fun. Folks, I'm going by memory here, and actually watching X-Men 97 kind of helped me remember. But they have a big battle, blah blah blah. And remember, Professor X dies, but doesn't really go until
he goes to space.
Yes.
With the Shi'ar.
And it was cool. I think that's a good. And,
I thought that was a good ending. Yeah, that was a much better ending, I think, than the Spider-Man.
Yeah, no, absolutely, no question.
I think Spider-Man was a better cartoon. We've talked about this. I think Spider-Man was a much more entertaining and a better cartoon. I think the storytelling in X-Men was better.
Yeah.
Just the storytelling, not the pacing.
Not
the actual
I know what you're saying.
Entertainment. Just the way it was written. We talked about all those episodes were like multi-part episodes and long-form storytelling. I think they really put a lot into those episodes that made you feel for those characters. And when they came back with X-Men 97, they continued that. The writing from the original and the reboot on that show was always done so well. The animation on both Spider-Man and the original version of X-Men, god awful, but you got to forgive it. It was a product of its time. But storytelling on that X-Men show was done really, really well. People to this day, I think, look at that X-Men cartoon as the standard of what X-Men should be.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Especially Wolverine and the voice. And, Gambit and everything. Just the whole design.
Oh, yeah.
The whole thing. Speaking of other 90s shows, but I think just kind of worth mentioning, was The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. If I recall, I believe the final episode is when it's all empty, and then Will kind of just, hey, it's a good ending. Yeah. Whatever you feel about Will Smith now and all that stuff. Hey, it was a fun show. That final episode, right? A bit of a tearjerker, but it was good.
Yeah.
He's walking out at late Uncle Phil, and it was good. Yeah. I think that show is still rewatchable, still fun. I think another show that I think had an awful final couple of seasons, and last awful episode was actually Family Matters. I know you and I talked about this in a previous episode. Urkel goes to space. Harriet. They have a different Harriet by the final 2 seasons, and
it's on a different network, too.
Oh, wow. Okay, maybe you're right.
I think it went from ABC to CBS to end that show, yeah. I think ABC was like, we've kind of hit the wall with this. We're done. But CBS saw how popular it was. I think they brought it back, if I remember correctly.
But, just not that had a bad ending. And I think you and I talked about this, too, in the past, but how we said, like, certain shows, like, they're kind of hard to rewatch. Like, Full House. I know they came out with Fuller House. And,
it's just, who cares to watch it again?
And just those shows, those are a product of its time. You know what I mean? But, I mean, I still think Fresh Prince of Bel-Air are funny to watch. Certain episodes are really fun. I think Fresh Prince is probably, out of the 90s TV shows, the ones that come to mind that are still very funny and still really hold up. A little, like I said, I think Family Matters is funny, but not as, keeping it real, it's not as tight as, as Fresh Prince. And I think the pinnacle of his is Home Improvement. Home Improvement is masterpiece,
great.
in terms of comedies. But
I think Boy Meets World is still watchable.
Oh yeah,
too. That's another one.
I forgot about that show. Yeah, then what happens at the end? What happens? They graduate high school, right? I think Mr. Feeney.
They graduate high school, and I
Mr.
think
Feeney
does
like that final speech, right? Like, you're my favorite students, or some crap like that. He retires.
He gives that speech where he's like, he tells them to do good, and Topanga, being the smart one on the show for all those seasons, like, don't you mean we should do well? And he says, no, do good, and basically is saying, do good things in the world and not just do well in life. So it's a nice little speech, and it's very, very heartwarming and touching because Mr. Feeney has somehow been their teacher from elementary school through college.
Yeah.
We just buy into that because it's a TV show. It is ridiculous. But I think that show, though, is largely still watchable. I was rewatching it for a while, and I kind of didn't lose interest in it. I lost time, and wasn't going to spend my time on Boy Meets World. But
yeah.
There's a lot in that show that is still relatable and still fun. And I think it's more rewatchable than a Full House for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Mm-hmm. I think as we're kind of wrapping up, I think it's just some things are just kind of worth mentioning. Dinosaurs, a TV show. I know we know those characters.
That show is a dark ending.
Yes, where they basically it's the asteroid that wipes them all out. Well, the whole show that was kind of allude to it. That the reckoning is coming, and the final episode they all kind of just sitting together. It was very dark.
It was really dark.
That show is hard to rewatch.
It's a great show.
Yeah, I find it kind of hard to rewatch now. I like all the puppetry.
It is
and
hard
all
to
that
rewatch,
stuff.
but and I don't know why it's hard to rewatch because the themes of the episodes still hold up, and I love a good puppetry, and that was all practical effects. I don't know what it is. Part of me thinks it's because I don't want to watch that sad ending again, when I know they're all going to die. I think that's part of it. But that show, as much as it was a children's show, really wasn't. It was a children's show because you had puppet dinosaurs, right? And so that captures the imagination of a kid. But when you watch the show, it was almost more like watching Roseanne.
Yeah.
I compare it to Roseanne. Earl Sinclair is the dinosaur. They were the Sinclairs. Yep. He reminds me very much of a Dan Connor from Roseanne.
Yeah, I'm sure that was inspired. I'm sure it. Without a doubt.
But that show, I'm gonna go back and rewatch it. I think it was on Disney Plus. I don't know if it still is, but you can find anything you want on the internet. I am gonna go back, I think, and rewatch that. I had started it and then I stopped, but I know I stopped because I'm like, I don't want to watch this family die at the end of it.
Yeah. Well, hey, yeah. Mm-hmm. These last two, PJ, this is way after our time, but it was MASH. I just felt like we should just talk about it. That was a huge. I remember it was on Nick at Night. It was on TV Land, and I took these are obviously when they did reruns, but that was big during that time period. And then I didn't know this because I was looking up other stuff. I was just curious. I was like, I used to watch as a kid on reruns. Was Gilligan's Island. I used to think that show was funny, but they actually never had a final episode. It got canceled, so they're actually still on that. They're still on that island, PJ.
They're still on that island. Didn't they do a couple of TV movies? Was that after the series was over or during the series? Maybe.
Man, I don't even know, man.
I think they had a series, like a couple of TV movies and stuff that they've done. So, I think if I remember correctly, there was a TV movie where they get off the island and then somehow they get shipwrecked back on the island.
Right.
I remember that vaguely. But I do like Gilligan's Island. That's another show that I used to love. That was, I can't think of the name. Was it John Denver? Was that Gilligan?
I think you're right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was a fun show. It's funny because TV shows from back then were for everyone, where now it's not. Like, you can't watch a TV show with your family because if you have one, because God only knows what they're going to talk about and you don't want to watch it in front of your parents.
Everything was...
but back then, all the shows were just for everyone.
Yeah, and everything was...
Like, I loved I Dream of Jeannie.
Yes, I used to watch that as a kid, too, everything was just seemed... Everything just seemed like, I don't know, just variety, creative.
Bewitched was another good one.
Yeah. All that stuff was just so creative. And
you know what show is begging for a remake, although it'll never happen, but it totally could, is Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yeah.
I think they've tried in the past to bring that back a number of different times, but I really feel like there's a world in which Welcome Back, Kotter could be remade in a modern urban setting, and it would be great.
Yeah, no question. But folks, I think that's it, PJ. Let us know if you have any other TV shows that had great endings or horrendous endings, and a lot of these shows we mentioned, they still hold up because of their endings, and it's just amazing how, like we said, like an ending can really, hey, it's important to have endings to stories. End them right, because
Yeah.
Hey, look about the MCU, right? They really should have ended at Endgame, right? Like it would have.
It was in the title.
Yes, I mean, and then we know the rest is history. Same time, same table.
Have a good one.
Boys and girls, lunchtime is over. For more information, visit their website at coolkidslunchtable.podbean.com. Follow the boys on all social media platforms. Just search Cool Kids Lunch Table Podcast. Now get to class before you get detention.